Try to find a seat if you can. We have empty seats in between. Try to jump in there if you possibly can. If you're comfortable standing in the back, that's okay too. You're back there with our new posters of the site. Please be looking at those as well. But there are seats up here if you want to have a seat. I'm Don Walters. I'm with the EPA in Region 6, and our team is here this evening to talk about the San Jacinto River Waste Pit site. I want to go over some things before we get into a lot of information sharing. First, I want to say, again, welcome. We're doing this meeting in cooperation with the state of Texas, Harris County, and the Commissioner's Office here in this area. I want to personally thank Julie Cannella of the Center. She and her staff have been a lot of help to us in getting this wonderful meeting room, which we've had, by the way, a number of meetings in now on this site going back for several years. I see a lot of familiar faces that were here for some of those earlier meetings. Well, here we are again. So, I want to go over some logistics on what we need to do here. First of all, again, please sign in. We want to make sure everyone signs in if you're comfortable doing that. Be sure to see the posters, and we have plenty of handouts for you about the site over on these tables in the back. Current fact sheets, information on what we're doing. There's an agenda back there, just various information for you to have. Next, and importantly, I want to do some introductions. Something that our agency feels is very important and essential to do when we're out meeting with the public and in a community like this. First of all, let me go through the list. Do we have any of our congressional representatives here, federal or state? Anyone here? Well, they're always welcome if they decide. They've been here in the past, so I always want to check. Huh? Well, we're federal, but we're not congressional. Yeah, we're not congressional though. Okay, EPA staff are here, and I want to start with Mr. Carlos Sanchez. Would you all just please stand up and introduce yourselves? Come on around.
My name is Carlos Sanchez. I'm chief of the Arkansas and Texas Superfund section.
I'm Gary Miller. I'm the remedial project manager for the site, and I'll be talking with you this evening about what's going on there. So think about all your questions. We're looking forward to telling you about the site and learning from you about what your issues and concerns are. So anyway, thanks for coming.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Val Michael Leos, and I'm like Gary. I work with Gary. He's the remedial project manager, and I'm what's called the removal project manager for the site. And my portion of the site had to deal mainly with the cap and the waste pits that are involved, and the work that was done there, and any further inspections or issues that may come up with the cap. So I also will be presenting an update along with Gary concerning the waste pits. And I look forward to answering any questions that you may have or any concerns that I can help clarify. I'm here, so thanks.
Okay, thank you. Let's continue. Let's go to our state agencies. TCEQ, back. Who's here from TCEQ? Who all's here? Linda Broach. Crystal Taylor. Okay, anyone else from TCEQ? State Health Department, I know you're here. You all please introduce yourselves.
Dana Rivera with the State Health Department.
Tina Walker. We have some more out there.
You have some more out there? Okay. Okay, let's go Harris County. I know some of you. Bob, you want to get everyone from your team?
Yeah, I'm Bob Allen, Director of Harris County Pollution Control. I've got Dr. Latrice Babin here also, and Mike Ware.
Very good. Okay, and I know I think I've seen someone here from the Port of Houston Authority. Back there and back. Okay, Linda's here from the Port of Houston. Okay, great. Well, let's move on and start getting into some more details. I want to go over some ground rules before we get into the presentations. We're going to do presentations, and this is real important. In order to keep this meeting flowing and on time and on schedule, we know that you have a lot of questions.
Get back on the mic. I can't hear you.
You can't hear?
No, sir. I didn't hear what you're saying.
Okay. Now can you hear? Okay. So, to repeat, ground rules for the meeting. We're going to start here in just a minute. We're going to do presentations on the side as you see on the agenda. We have a lot of questions and answers to that, so we need to keep things moving along. We're asking that you please limit your questions or statements to 3 to 4 minutes. 3 to 4 minutes. That's important so that we can give everyone here a chance to speak and say what's on their mind. Now, if you have more to say, that's fine. We'll come back to you at the end. We'll come back and continue on. But we're going to go 3 to 4 minutes or less on your questions, and then we'll respond to that, and we'll keep that moving on through the time frame that we have up until roughly around 8 o'clock. We'll be keeping track of time, and we'll start calling you down if you go past that, okay? We want to give everyone a chance to speak who would like to. So, first thing up, we're going to get into our presentations. First presenter up will be Gary Miller on the RIFS and other matters.
All right, again, I'd like to thank everybody for coming. I know you've heard, and we've talked about a lot of sample data, and it seems like it goes on and on. And I'll do a little review of that, but the main thing I want to talk about is the cleanup alternatives. We're in the feasibility study stage, and what that is, it's a report that considers various alternatives for cleaning up the site. So now, one thing I want to say, the feasibility study that we have is a draft. It's not final. It's being revised right now. But the alternatives that are in there now are not the final alternatives, but they will be included in the final. And so I think you'll be able, or hopefully you'll be able to kind of get a flavor of what some of the options are for cleaning up the site. And please, if you do have some questions, please ask them, and then, we'll consider them. We do have note takers here, and so they're very important. So anyway, I think I'll start out with, here's just a map of the site. There's the San Jacinto River. The waste pits is that red square on the top, on the north end of I-10. The site also includes the southern impoundments that are just south of I-10. There's Channelview over there, and Highlands over here. Probably about 15 miles, river miles below the dam, to tell you where that is. All right. Well, here's the problem. This is a picture that Harris County found. This is from 1965, and this is the southern impoundment. And that's when those waste pits were constructed, and there's some type of waste material being pumped into the pits. So that's when it started. This was forwarding to several years ago before the cap was installed. You may be able to, I want to go back. You may be able to see some grayish type material. That is waste. It contains dioxin. It's waste from paper mill that was hauled there and disposed of it. But that's what the problem is right there. Okay, then in ending in 2011, there was a cap put over that material. That the waste pits had subsided. Probably over half the waste pits were underwater now. The river was washing over it. It was washing into the river. So the purpose of this cap was to stop that while we're doing all this investigation and figuring out what the cleanup would be. It'd give us time to do that and stop the material going in the river. One thing I wanted to point out is a big part of the waste pits are underwater. This yellow line shows the outline. As you can see, this is all waste pit material. Actually, This part right in here that's underwater right here, that has the highest concentration. It goes up to 30,000 parts per trillion of dioxin. Okay, so here's one of the few slides I'll have that has some numbers on it. It just shows what the dioxin levels are. Keep hitting the wrong buttons. Right here is 31,000 in the northern waste pits. And the southern impoundments, actually it's higher. It gets up to 50,000. That 31,000 is right on the surface. That 50,000 is down between about 6 and 10 feet. So once you get out in the river, levels are much lower. This 198 right there is the highest surface sediment concentration out in the river. And then it gets much lower as you go north from there and go south. So. Okay, this is one other thing. I know there's been a lot of concerns of folks that live on the river about their yards and the water washing up on their yards and possibly contaminated with dioxin. And so here a while back, we did take some samples on both sides of the river. These are just basically randomly located homes that are near the waste pit sites. And the benchmark, or the residential number we look at, is 50 parts per trillion dioxin. And the highest number we found in those houses was 12, and all the rest were low. So I think we can tell the folks that no, your yards aren't contaminated. Well, those was.
Have you ever watched anybody die from poisoning? Have you ever been poisoned? I have.
No, I haven't. You know, the fish in the river are contaminated, and the sediment is contaminated.
The whole lake is a pit now. Hurricane Ike blew it everywhere. That's the problem. You guys want to put a cap on a little bitty spot, but guess what? The whole lake is the spot now. Now what you gonna do? Dredge it?
Excuse me, can you hold on for a minute, let him finish the
Sure, go ahead.
presentation? We'll come back.
Absolutely, I would love to hear what you have to say about
Okay,
that.
okay, let him get through the presentation, please.
Okay, these are some of the action levels that we're looking at. They're based on the risk. Basically what we do is we determine the cleanup levels based on the exposure scenarios. And so just starting within the cap first. Yes, sir.
So you presented some numbers there. What's important about those numbers? How do those numbers affect the fishing, us eating the fish, the kids swimming in the river, people drinking water from the reservoirs right here?
Yeah. That's what these are based on. They're based on the exposure routes that those could be. Like, for instance, the one up here that's 220, that's based on people walking in the river, in the mud and the sediment of the river, swimming, and also eating the fish. So that's what's been determined based on the risk assessment, that anything above that level would create a risk for that. So that's how those numbers were determined. So I'm not sure if that answered your question, but that's what those numbers are based on. Yes, there's been a model done that's included in the several of the reports that were done for the site. So yes, it has been done.
And that's on humans too?
Yes, the risk is for both the ecological risk and for humans. And most of the risk is for human health. There is some ecological risk, but relatively little. Most of the risk is for humans. And of course, I know folks are aware there's a fish advisory out there because the fish have various levels of dioxin, PCBs, and pesticides. So
most of these people, I've lived here all my life since I was 15, 16 years old, been in this river. We've known there was 2 pits here all our lives, but nothing's ever been done.
yeah, you're right. Those pits were there in '65, and so this.
They wouldn't let us water ski below Highway 9.
Yeah. So they're a problem. Remember those pictures I showed? They were that gray material. That was the dioxin waste, and it was washing into the river until just Well, 2011, when that cap was put on it, from 65 to 2011. So you're right, a long time.
So who decides what's an acceptable level?
Hey, why does it take going to Southman Paper, one other paper company, another paper company, and international paper for the EPA to figure out that the guys that work in the field and talk to them every time they showed up, you don't know that it's been polluted? God, ma'am, I wouldn't admit to it. That I was so damn stupid it took 30 years for me to figure this stuff was being dumped out there.
Amen, brother. I got you back.
Yes, sir. It's a problem. You know, it's a big
I'll
problem.
tell you what, maybe you could get the geniuses who've got working on that pond over there, the Highlands Reservoir, that they took the land away from the farmers and filled it full of water. That was fine. Now they've got concrete barriers. They've got old pumps out there. They've got people using that as a pasture when nobody can go there. You can't put a boat in it.
Okay, thank you. Let's let the project manager finish his presentation. I know you have questions. We'll get to your questions. Let's let him finish his presentation so we can get through this. And then we have a second presentation on the cap situation. So just hold your questions. We'll start this question thing shortly. All right.
Maybe it's about time somebody went in there.
The acceptable level.
We don't want any guys.
Yeah. Well,
What's acceptable to us? Don't tell us this is what's acceptable.
Well, recently EPA did take another look at the docks and protective levels, and it was lowered a lot. For instance, that number I showed before was 50 parts per trillion for the homes. Well, that used to be 1,000, and just recently it was lowered to 50.
Everybody knows EPA's paid off. Y'all can say the low stuff.
All right. Well, I would like to get back to this gentleman's question because the answer is 220 is the number out in the river. That's based on the fish consumption. And, yes, sir. For dioxin. Okay.
That's not a fair number. What did I say, 20?
Could you please hold your question until he finishes the presentation?
You're throwing a bunch of numbers at us that have no meaning. You can stand here and say 10 parts per trillion could be acceptable. It means nothing to us.
I understand what you're saying. That is based on a risk assessment and based on the toxicity studies for dioxin. And there's a lot of numbers that go in there, and that is in the reports. And I'd be glad to, we can discuss where those numbers came from, but it's not arbitrary. It's a number based on the best science that we have right now.
What's the option? There's 210 of them. It's
Right.
the worst of the worst of the worst. You're killing everybody out there. Everybody's dying. Dogs, cats. I mean, come on, man.
All right. Well, let's go on. We'll come back to that.
I know you're
You're talking silly numbers. I mean, they have no meaning.
Okay, just hold on.
All right. Well, here's, and I would like to talk with, perhaps after the meeting, we can talk some more about that. But these are the alternatives that are in the draft right now. These are not the final alternatives. And one thing I wanted to tell everybody, there has been no cleanup option selected. I know in the draft it did recommend one of them, but that is not the option that's recommended. The way that would work is we would propose a cleanup plan for a public meeting and get the comments. Now, this is not that. This is just an update on where we're at right now. It's kind of a preliminary for that, but there will be another meeting.
Run right through it. You've got pipelines running right through there. You know they're double casing, but still you ain't putting an eyeball on them. You don't know if they're ate up from these dogs. Salt water eats everything. Add these chemicals, it eats those pipes, brother.
Yeah, everything's corrosive, that's for sure. Okay, but anyway, the alternatives that are in there right now are basically just deed restrictions. That's alternative 2. Alternative 3 is a cap upgrade. That's the one that was recommended in the draft, and that is not the recommended remedy. No.
What about burning the stuff? They tend to get rid of a lot in 2008 when they went above.
Well, incineration is included in these alternatives. It's one of the options.
They burned it out and they went in there, and that way they could build a beautiful bridge. They could put people in there. They pay taxes to do that. And you never heard anything about it. I haven't seen anything yet. They had me fishing out there when I'm 80 years old.
Are you saying burn it in place? Is that?
They broke that stuff up, and they built facilities down at Barrett Station, and built and burned. Why
Okay.
can't you burn this?
Well, that is, you wouldn't want to burn it in place because that'd create a lot of air pollution. But one of the alternatives is to haul it off and incinerate it and burn it. Okay.
Most of us in here will be dead by the time it gets done anyway.
All right.
Some of them won't. You guys found it in 2005 and you ain't even started. That's almost 10 years, brother.
Yeah, we started, Superfund started on this in 2008. That's when it was listed.
What's that, a few signs?
Pardon?
Your Superfund project, what's that, a couple signs listed? Because all they did was put a cap on it, squish it out everywhere, and then everybody got sick.
No. Well, that stuff was washing out in the river. That cap just stopped it from washing out in the river. And if we hadn't put that cap on
It
there,
didn't wash out nothing because Megan Sand had a huge hole in the side of it. The hole's in the bottom, and when you put all the rock on the top, it swished it right out the bottom and right into the river.
no,
You don't know nothing.
that's incorrect. Yeah, there's been.
Go back and check your records on who owns the property
No,
next to
it was dredged, but that's
Megan Sand, they dredged it all out, dude.
that's been dredged, but that part of the cap's been covered up under the cap.
Really? Is that why I go on Google and still see it seeping out the top left corner?
It's not seeping out.
2013, check it out yourself.
Okay.
Why do you all take a defensive position? Why aren't you on board with us fighting waste management? Slow down.
I'm trying to be as balanced and as accurate as I can. I'm not. I'm just trying to tell you folks what's out there and what these alternatives for cleanup are.
I think you're taking a defensive position.
I'm trying not to.
We're trying to provide information on what the options are facing us and how we're proceeding on this, so let us tell you what it is.
All right. Well, just to finish this up, alternative 4 was to take the 25% of the most highly contaminated material and solidify it, and then cover that with the cap. And the purpose of that would be to reduce the potential for it to migrate out of the pits. Alternative 5 would be to take that same material and remove it, haul it off-site and dispose of it. And the last alternative that's in the draft is a full removal of everything above that 220 level. So here's a picture of alternative number 3. These areas, the rock would be beefed up, the slope would be flattened, and that's that alternative. Just a few parts about that. It'd take about 2 months to do that construction, and the cost would be right at $3 million. Okay. Here's alternatives 4 and 5. This is the one where you take the 25% of the most highly contaminated material, and that would be in these 3 areas right here, down to a depth of about 10 feet. And in one of the alternatives, it'd be stabilized with something like cement or fly ash or something. And in the other alternative, it would be removed. Now, that total volume would be about 50,000 cubic yards. And the construction time would be roughly a year, a little over a year. And the cost would range from $11 million for alternative 4. That was the mixing with cement or stabilizing, to from $24 million to over $100 million. Now, the 24 to 100, that's based on that's for the removal. And the range there depends on what would be done with material. If it were disposed in a landfill, a permitted landfill to accept this material, then it cost about $24 million. If it went to an incineration facility, that would be over $100 million. So.
Hey, well, doesn't those guys make like $1.5 billion, something like that? It said in the very first lawsuit, these guys get like $1.5 billion like every year. So what's the problem? Oh, it's every day. $1.5 billion between the companies every day.
Yeah, well, I'm not saying which. Yeah, I'm not saying which is preferred or which is better than the other one right now. These are just options for cleaning it up. All right. Okay. The last one, the full removal, there'd be cuts down to 20 feet where that previous dredging happened. That's in this area right here. There'd also be an area off this property right here that'd be about a 6-foot cut. That total volume would be over 200 to perhaps 250,000 cubic yards, and the construction time would be longer. It'd be about 16 months, and that cost would range from $100 million to $600 million, depending on the disposal, whether it's taken to a landfill or incinerated. So.
May I offer that I dare say everyone here would like that if we had to choose. Number 6, we save a lot of time. Let's go on to that.
Okay.
Get on to it.
What we'll do is we'll select the remedy, and that'll probably be this summer. And then after that, there'll have to be some legal paperwork worked out, and then the work will start. Now, I don't have a schedule for you yet, but it may be several years after this summer. So, who chooses the remedy? No. The EPA will select the remedy after the public comment period and after consulting with all the other agencies. And one thing I should also mention, this is a big site. It's an important site. It's got dioxins. It is highly contaminated. So one thing EPA is going to do is we have this thing called a remedy review board. That's where we bring together people, EPA folks, senior people from all over the country, and we present the site to them. We say, here's the site, kind of pretty much like what we're doing now. And we say this is what we're proposing to do. Now, we don't have anything selected or recommended yet, but we get all their input in on it too, and I'll ask a lot of questions about, well, does that make sense? Is that protective? Is that a good thing to do? And so that's one thing. It's not just us. It's not just the local agencies. It's senior people from throughout EPA. So
you guys are the ones watching out for us.
Well, we're doing what we can.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
You guys are watching out for us. How do you let commercial fishermen crab in these polluted waters and take the crabs to Kima and sell them to people in Kima, and the crabs are not sold as polluted?
Yeah, I know there's one case.
No, you don't know. You know there is. There's 2 or 3 different crab licenses out in these waters, and they take them to Kima every day. The people that buy the crabs there don't know it.
Why did you let them people at both works build on top of that other side across the road?
You talking about the southern impoundments?
Yes. They built houses, warehouses, put posts down and everything else.
Well,
They know it's contaminated?
on the southern impoundment, the top 3 feet or so is not contaminated. Now, because that's fill material. As you get below that, yes, it's highly contaminated.
Over there, they got them boat works there. They got a flare right there, about 15 feet off. They burn that stuff out of them forests, which is contaminated. We smell it every morning, almost every day. Y'all don't do nothing about that, do you?
Well, we're here to talk about the San Jacinto site.
It's right there.
Oh, I know.
It's right across the street.
I know. But we're talking about the waste pits now.
You just let them build on top of one.
But let's get back. Could you ask your question again?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
My name is JT, and I'll ask my question very frankly. I'm a fisherman around here. I grew up on this river. There's commercial crabbers the crab in these waters that y'all put signs up on that say don't eat the crabs, don't eat the catfish. The crab traps are right there in those waters. Those crab traps are picked up daily. They take those crabs down to Kima. They sell them to the people down there, and they're sold out of the fish houses to unconcerning people from Webster, Friendswood, or whatever. They don't know where these crabs come from. How does the state and the EPA sell crab license in polluted water?
You know, that's a good question. There's fish, there is a fish advisory, and the fish and crabs are contaminated. And you're right, people are crabbing. What I started to say a while ago is there were some people taking clams out of there too, and they were selling them. I mean, that's what they did. Now, some of those guys were caught.
People are licensed by the state of Texas. They're not just people that are just licensed by anybody. We pay our $30 to fish. We fish legally.
Yeah, that's an issue. We have talked about it, and I'm sorry I don't have an answer for you right now on it.
Yeah, we need to keep moving on. Thank you very much. We have some others. Why don't we take a few more questions on your part before we get into the cap? Is that okay?
Sure.
Just take a few more on this part. We'll go to the cap, then we'll come back.
We've got one right
Yes, sir,
here.
right over here.
People that think they're contaminated and messed up their health, where do you recommend they go try and get something done?
For what? The contaminated fish?
Medical attention.
Medical attention for me is like $7,000 every 7 weeks to get gamma globulin. They can't come here.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things going on. Some of you may have seen the folks. The Texas State Health Department was in the community this week talking to folks and finding out information like that. But, you know, the only thing I can tell you about, you know, if you've got some health problems, you know, go see your doctor or let me know, and we'll pass it on to the health
Yeah, I want to
department.
ask the state.
An attorney, and he's going to take 40% or 50% of whatever he's supposed to get out of it.
Go to a toxicologist, and they're going to do your blood and tell you what's wrong with you, or a heavy metal doctor. That's
Okay.
where you go.
I got all kinds of
They do. They have
Does the state health, you all have anything you want to add to that?
We didn't quite hear the question. I'm sorry. We couldn't hear the question clearly.
I was saying, if you figure you got problems from this river, okay, I go to a neurologist and I get gamma globulin. I've been 13 years old over here swimming and everything else. I'm 81 right now. So I don't have any muscles. I can't hardly walk. And it costs $7,000 every 7 weeks to take gamma globulin.
Well, I mean, as long as you're working with your personal physician, I mean, obviously he's more aware of your personal fire and your health and things like that. But
The physicians don't know how to deal with dioxin poisoning, heavy metals, and toxins. They are not schooled in that. They have no idea what's going on. I've been to so many doctors with my daughter, my family, my husband, my animals. Nobody knows.
So do you think it will help if we try to get some things out here that we do physician education on environmental contamination, what's out here and what they need to look for?
And educate the doctors, absolutely.
Education is a lot of it.
And so why don't, if you're out here doing this health study, why don't you get with him and get his information? That way you can include him in your study.
Okay, because we are not doing the
right,
study.
we're not doing the study.
And you have to understand that I have a very young child. This is how it goes. Understand,
You need to talk to us.
my son goes.
Let's come back up here. Yes, sir, you've been holding your hand up for a long time. What would you like to say?
Speak up, Fred.
I'm Fred Lewis with Texas Together, and I have a couple of questions. First of all, I don't understand why the Texas Department of Health is unwilling to do an epidemiological study. Can you explain that? Because you have all these people out here exposed to all these dangerous chemicals, and yet the state is unwilling to, in Dr. Bokamp's report, do an epidemiological study. So I don't understand why it is the state's unwilling to do that.
I know I have talked with them about doing an epi study, and I don't know, would you like to?
Yeah, I mean, I can try to address some of it. I am not an epidemiologist. Those are who would do an epidemiological study for the state health department. The biggest problem that we face when you're talking about an actual study is that if you come out and you look at a community, you have to have something to compare it to. So we have to be able to find a community that has the same socioeconomic levels, the same environmental stuff, that doesn't have the contamination. And until we can find something like that, I mean, what do we do with this study?
Well, so
the problem is that
if
if we
how
find
does anything ever get done? You have to start somewhere. You have to start somewhere.
The toxicologist we hired said there are difficulties in doing epidemiological studies. There's difficulties in doing everything. But he didn't understand why the state didn't do it, and he didn't think it was impossible. But, you know, it's ignorance is bliss is the way that people feel out here. You say, well, we don't know there's anything, anybody's health problems out here, but then you refuse to study it. I have another question for you, if I could. Why is it y'all have not done much testing of redfish and flounder? I mean, that's what people eat. And yet, when I look through the fish studies, okay, let me speak up. I asked them why has there been so few studies done of redfish and flounder, both of which are bottom feeders. Okay, they eat oysters, subject to dioxin. Why they've studied so little of the fish that everybody consumes, and they test things like catfish, which at least some of us don't like to eat. And I just don't understand why we're testing the things that people are least likely to eat.
You're right. Most of the sampling that was done for the site was catfish. All right, blue crab were in there. But one thing I did want to say is the health department, for their fish advisory, has sampled flounder and redfish and specks and all those types of game fish that people generally eat more than they do hardheads.
I have one other question. I have a lot, but you said 3. So the report that was done, the feasibility study, was done by Integral Anchor, who was hired by the responsible parties. The responsible parties are being sued by the county. They're also being sued by private parties. And when you read the report, frankly, it reads like it's been written by lawyers. And I know I'm a lawyer. And that's how I'd write it. It's it obfuscates, it's vague. And my question is, why are we relying on a report by an entity being paid millions of dollars by the responsible parties who want to escape liability and escape the cost of the fixing of the waste pits?
You're correct. It was written by consultants for the potentially responsible parties. And that's the way EPA has done it for a while. Now, I will tell you that you're correct. There are a lot of statements in that report that just didn't make any sense.
I have one other question.
Could you please?
Sorry, but it's important.
Yeah, could you be brief? We need to move on.
I'll be real brief.
Okay.
You were talking about the parts per billion of dioxin allowed in the state of Texas. But when I looked at the amount of dioxin that was allowed in the states, the standards for soil sediments, Texas and Alabama's standards were 100, 200 times that of other states. So when you talk about that's some standard that everybody in the United States agrees with, that's not true. There are places in the United States that don't allow the type of exposure that we allow here. Isn't that correct?
Well, first of all, there is no set standard nationwide for dioxin. Now, what I've said before is EPA had a toxicity assessment for dioxin, and a year or two ago it was reviewed, and it was lowered by a lot. For instance, for yards it used to be 1,000. Well, now it's 50, so it went down from 1,000 to 50, so that's a huge drop. Now, I don't know what the other states are doing, but the risk assessments that we did are all based on that new, much lower standard. So.
Okay, we're going to pause right there after answering that question. Hold on. Say it really brief, please.
I bet you never thought this consideration. You said the thing has been there since '65, right? Okay. I knew that. Anyway, I don't know if y'all are aware of them sand dredges sitting up in the San Jacinto River. They had the night said you couldn't dredge anything north of the I-10. But they set out there, them dredges. They took that sand out of that river and out there where that place is. They put it in trucks and hauled it off somewhere to somebody's house, yard, or any other place, and it's contaminated. And I helped get them stopped. They were sucking that sand out by sucking a hole, and they was caving the walls off of down through the San Jacinto River. And the only reason they didn't go on down further, they couldn't get them dredges underneath the bar through that trap. Y'all didn't know about that. Look, there's a lot of things you guys ain't telling these people that I found out today. All you have to do is get on the internet. Y'all kept saying they didn't know who caused this and who's responsible for it. I know who's responsible for it because I found out today who it was. And they knew. I'll tell you in a minute.
You're correct. There was dredging going on, and that dredging happened right out here in this area.
All down in there.
Well, just right next to the waste pits.
Hey, they were dredging it out.
That's correct.
The walls were caving in.
That's correct. And what I'm going to show you is there's a contour. You can see this little notch that reaches into the waste pits. Well, that was probably due to the dredging.
Okay. We come.
They took them islands out there and they were dragging that goddamn surface thing, sticking it on the beach.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, let's keep moving on. Just take a pause. You want to go?
No, I've got one more thing I need to add, and this is an important because this gets down to what we do and we consider these alternatives. Cleanup has to be protected. Okay, that's the main thing. It's got to be safe. But then there's other things we do to rank them, and I'll just there's a lot of stuff on this slide. I'll just mention a few. But say if you did alternative 3, well, yeah, that'd be the lowest cost, the quickest, but it doesn't remove any waste material. All right, it would all still be there. So as far as long-term effectiveness, anything that removes the waste material is going to be more effective than anything that doesn't. And
That's a no-brainer.
right. Okay. The only other thing I wanted to say is alternative 6. That's the full removal. It takes it all out of there. Now, one of the big concerns is that takes 16 months. All right.
We don't care.
All right. But suppose. Well, that's not the point. The point is, when you start doing that work for 16 months, you're going to have to take that cap off of it to get to it. So what's going to happen when a storm comes in and you got that cap removed? Now, okay. But what I'm saying is that's just something we need to factor in. And we may very well choose one of those alternatives that removes the cap and then removes some of all the material. But that's a risk. Now, you can mitigate it. For instance, you could just remove a part of the cap and dig that out, and then move on next to it and do another part where you don't have the whole thing exposed. Right. So, yes, ma'am.
A few weeks back, they had an article in the Houston Chronicle about the kids. And in the article, they said that a storm is coming through Ridge.
Okay, Val Michael will talk about that. But yes, there was some erosion, some damage, whatever word you want to use. And Val Michael will talk about that. Actually, there were some repairs that were just completed. So that'll be his part of it. Okay, I guess with that, No, I'm pretty much done. Let me get down to your... Okay.
Sure you don't want to keep going? You're doing great, man. You're doing great. You got the crowd warmed up for me. I can see that. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Val Michael Leos. Unique name. My parents made it up. So, my mom, who lives here in Houston, actually. So I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the work that was done in the past. I see a lot of familiar faces, so I'm not going to recap on all the work that was done for the temporary, I think there was a word missing from Gary's lips, and he meant to say temporary cap that we have right now on top of the waste pits. But we do have what's called a temporary armor cap, and the reason being was we discovered that this waste pits were not secured, and they've been releasing waste into the river for years and years and years. And we just discovered this a few years ago. Actually, the state, TCEQ, was out doing an inspection, and they're like, EPA, you need to get over here right now, and you need to look at this. So that kind of led me to go out to the waste pits, take a look around, and sure enough, there was this gray material just oozing into the river. And so there's two different programs, without going a lot into the details, but there's the removal program under EPA, and there's what's called the remedial program, which Gary is a part of. The removal program, we have a much shorter time frame, and we have authorities that are similar, but we can get things done a little bit quicker under our authorities. So with that being said, I met with the responsible parties and said, hey, you guys need to go out there and you need to do something now. This waste is being released. We need to do something now rather than put a sign up. As the gentleman said, EPA, we like to put signs up. But you know what? We need to do more than that. So a temporary cap, just to keep it from continuing to release, was the solution. That's the quickest thing that we could do until we figure out, we do more studies, and this is what my colleague Gary's doing, until we can figure out what's the best remedy and get your input. So Gary was going through all the options, to consider, and it's complicated. There's a lot of issues that are involved with every alternative, but that's kind of a brief history of the cap. So the cap was placed back in 2010 or 2011, July of 2011, and there was an issue with the cap. Recently, there was a storm event. It wasn't a very big storm event, but back in July, and July of 2012, which prompted me to go out there and conduct an inspection, and it turns out the western berm of the cap, let's see if I can go back and show you a picture of what area I'm talking about here. This area right here, the rock that they had placed on there was washed away. I mean, there's no other way to say it, but that whole area, the berm that they had there, the rock washed away, and it's not supposed to do that. I mean, to put it frankly. So that was a big concern. We met with them. They immediately went out there after the storm event, placed additional rock, bigger rock, and then we started having lots of discussions about why that happened, or could have happened. Well, because of that, we hired, so EPA, we're the environmental guys, right? We deal mainly with the chemicals and remediation, but, we don't have, typically don't have hydrological engineers that deal with, construction of dams and construction of this. So we hired the Army Corps of Engineers, who do have those expertise, to take a closer look at the cap, the construction, and do an independent third-party review. So we had the Army Corps of Engineers. We gave them all the documents. We had conference calls. We met with the responsible parties, and we said, okay, why did this happen? Can you give us an idea? And so they issued a report. So I'm kind of going through the slides here. So this cap erosion that happened caused some concern with EPA. So we asked the Army Corps of Engineers. They came out a report recently that was finalized in November. And basically the Army Corps of Engineers found four issues with the cap construction and design. And they mainly had to do with the gradation of the materials and the slope that was placed, the placement of the rock, of the, you know, how high the rock was placed and how much, and et cetera. So with that report, EPA issued a letter to the responsible parties on November 1st saying you need to address these concerns now, immediately. So they submitted a work plan in December, and the work plan was approved in early January, and they started the repairs on the armor cap and finished this Monday, based upon the recommendation in the report. So based upon the report that the Army Corps of Engineers issued on the concerns with the cap is what the responsible parties came out and addressed with the cap. So that's the update. So construction repairs began on the 17th of this month, and on Monday I just got a report from their on-site project engineer that they had finished with the areas of the cap that needed repair work. They changed the slope, they added bigger rock, and they addressed the other issues in the report with concerns about the design and the variables. Hold on, we'll get to your questions. In the draft feasibility study that Gary is working with them on. So what does that mean, repairs? What exactly that mean? Here's an example. This is this poster board is back there. If you look at the cap as a whole, a lot of this portion here is underwater, but we still have rock on top of it and a filter fabric. This portion of the cap here is pretty much above high tide most of the year. And this one has a geomembrane, geotextile fabric along with the armor cap material. So these hash marks, these blue hash marks here, are the areas that they went back to based upon the Army Corps report and changed the slopes to a much flatter slope, and they added some additional rock to that. So these are the areas that they enhanced, is the word they used, enhanced, based upon the Army Corps of Engineers report. So here's some action shots from the work. They've got their dozers and loaders placing rock, and what I mean by slope is, if you can kind of pretend this is 3D, it's not, but the slope, how high and how long it is, they flatten the slopes. Here's another shot. This is looking along the southern berm. Here's I-10, and this is the southern portion of the berm. This is the eastern part of the pit. And then this is the central berm. So I'm standing in front of I-10 and I'm looking down towards the central berm. Here's Highlands community over here. So here's the central berm, and here's additional rock, and they flatten the slope. So, yeah. All right, questions? We had a hand up.
Yes. Channel 13 came out and interviewed my mom and dad, which lives the 2nd Street as you come into Highlands. And they found mercury, nickel, and I don't know what else.
Who's they?
Somebody from Channel 13.
So Channel 13 scientists came by and sampled your yard, is what I'm hearing you say?
The water faucet.
Oh, okay.
The water along the faucet, and told them, do not drink this.
Okay.
Are they on a well?
Yes. And what are y'all doing to spread the word for the people that do have well water there?
I wasn't aware there was concerns with the well water. Gary, were you aware of that?
As some of you know, we went out there, I don't know, about a year ago, and we sampled some wells. Now, this was several miles north, but there were some concerns about the water there. And we sampled for a broad range of things. And basically, we didn't find anything. Now, I don't know where your house is located.
The second street, whenever you cross, when you're on Interstate 10, you take a left on 2100, the second street as you're coming into Highlands. Those two streets and the travel park all were on well water. And we've had, both streets have so many cancer patients. It is unreal. So many people have died from cancer because we drank and we swam in the water.
Yeah. I will tell you, I don't know about the water there. I can tell you about the water. It's a couple of miles north. And I can.
Why that far north? Why not right there close?
I guess. Well, we know there's no contamination coming from the site in the groundwater. Now, there may be some contamination in your area from something. And perhaps the way to approach that is maybe talk to the health department and see if we can get something worked up for your area.
We have another question?
Yeah, my place is right behind the pit. You can see the pit from my yard.
Okay.
And they were going to, the EPA was going to do some samples of my yard. And then all of a sudden they got called off, and I called the number, and they told me that they done all the samples they were going to do. My samples, the water comes over my yard every day, and y'all didn't want to do no samples there. And you can see the pit, perfect from my yard.
When we were out there, we were trying, the people we sampled were the ones in those locations that showed.
Y'all didn't sample no yard, y'all sampled right there around the pit. The high cliffs way up there, y'all didn't even sample. My yard, the water's running on. Won't you come sample my yard, where the water comes on it every day?
Can you kind of point to your approximate area where?
It's right behind the pit.
That would be right here, sir. There's an industrial complex. This is behind the pit.
Yeah, it's across from it, not behind.
Oh, you mean over here?
Go
north. Go north. Straight up. Go straight north. Fish fire. Hold up. Yeah, right in there somewhere. Go north.
Okay, so in this area.
What we wanted to do is get the houses that were the ones we could get, and that determined a lot of the locations. But the other thing is we wanted to get as close as we could to the pits because we thought those would be most likely be the most contaminated.
My yard every day. Why didn't you check my yard?
Because we sampled these ones right here, which are closer to the pits.
High cliffs, there's no yards there.
On every one of these samples, we sampled close to the water. It was within the floodplain, down right next to the water. So if there was any, the water would come up to the same level as these. We weren't up on the cliffs. We were down next to the river. So.
You didn't sample any well water?
No. We sampled well water around the side here and in the aquifer below the pits. Both here and here, it was all non-detect.
You've done a hydrodynamic study?
Yes.
No, you need to take well water samples to do a hydrodynamic study.
This was a surface in the river.
That's not a hydrodynamic study. The well water, the water in those reservoirs is in communication with the river.
Yeah. Okay? You're correct.
People are drinking water that is in communication with these substances.
Yeah, the shallow zone is in communication with the river. And for instance, on this zone right here, the groundwater flows this way, and this way there's a high point right here in the middle. And on this area right here, it's basically flowing down away from this high point right here. And the deeper groundwater, which is where the aquifer is, down around 80 feet, then that water is kind of flowing to the southeast. So I'm sorry, when you said that, I thought it was in reference to the river. But there have been studies done on the groundwater flow as well.
I'm a lot closer now. I'm a lot closer than dump any back. Right there at the four corners.
Okay, we have some more questions. We have one lady back here. This young lady. All the ladies are young here.
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay? Yes. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Jackie Young. I work out here a lot in the community with Texans Together. I'm an environmental geologist as well, and I would like to know what wells you're or how you can say that the groundwater isn't contaminated, because from reading your RIFS studies, you sampled wells that are above 30 feet. Did you sample any wells around the pits that were below 30 feet?
Correct. There were two levels. Like right here around the pit, there were 3 wells basically in the shallow zone. and they were 30 feet or above. But we wanted to sample there because that would be the potentially highest contamination. And then if we found something, we'd follow it out. But to answer your question, we did go below 60 feet, below the clay zone in the upper part of the aquifer in those same locations, and those were all non-detect.
Okay, well, I haven't seen those. I didn't find those in the report for anything deeper than 30 feet. I looked, I didn't see them. But in what I did see in the 24-foot well and the 18-foot well that you guys have out there, over 50% of what you tested for almost had 100% detection rate. So I'm not sure why you're standing here and saying that you didn't.
Well, I'll show you in the report where those deeper wells were. And in those shallower zones, there were some hits of some low levels, but they were very low. And they weren't I'm not sure what you're referring to, I guess is what I'll say.
Benzene, arsenic, the water reports are in my briefcase. I can go get them. But off the top of my head, I remember those two being bold and your EPA reports being unacceptable. So, okay, my point is, the municipal water well that supplies over 7,300 people in this community is just north of there. There's thousands of water wells in the area. You guys came up about 3 miles north of the site, and you sampled 6 wells, and you also did a mini EPI study. In our wells, you found lead, and you also found a chemical called, or referred to as DEHP. It's a toxic chemical. It's a plasticizer. You guys also found it in the wells samples that you took at the pits. This chemical is outlawed in the European Union. It is, to the European Union, one of the top 6 deadliest chemicals. Yet you found it in our groundwater. And these people trust you guys. And the EPA sent these homeowners that have cancer and that have had heart surgeries and that are chronically ill. You guys sent them letters. And despite finding lead and DEHP and other things in the water,
uranium,
you sent them letters saying it was safe to consume. Now these people trust you guys. You guys are the agency that our government has set aside to protect us and our environment. So we trust you, and you guys are misleading these people.
Can I respond to that before? What I would like to say is, yes, there were things found, but there are health standards for all of those things, and all those detections were very much lower than the health standards, and most of the things were non-detect. So it's based on the best science we have. We said, yes, those were very low detections, but they're very much lower than is best we can figure out on the toxicity of those things. So that's what...
Why are our animals and our husbands and our children dying? Dying! We're dying. Why?
Unfortunately, I can't answer that. I don't know.
So the health department came to town and they did a health survey also at those 6 homes, and they put together something and said that, a report, and said that they didn't find anything. My mom's the one that spearheaded that and told them which houses to go to, because we knew in fact those people were on wells and they were chronically ill. Now how do you not find anything? Okay, so no, I'm not an epidemiologist, but I just happened to stay up all night studying it because of how it's affected me. This map here I've put together for the people here to see of all of the illnesses that I know: cancer, chronic kidney problems, autoimmune diseases, and it's clustered. There's a need. Sure, you don't have anything to compare it to another community, but in the meantime, people are dying, and we need you guys to eliminate the source. We need you to take the waste pits out of our community and deal with them elsewhere. And before you interrupt me, if you are having issues finding somewhere to take this waste, I've got a place in Boston who's willing to take it and incinerate it, and I'm not exactly for incineration, but it might be the best of all of the worst solutions. So here's their information, and they are ready to prepare transportation and everything. Woo! Deliver.
Jackie.
One little girl gets so much done, and you guys can't do anything.
Give it to them.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Go ahead. Do we have any other questions? We need to
keep moving around. That's great, thank you, but we need to move to some other folks who have had their hands up who have not had a chance to speak, like right here.
So you did say that the aquifers had been tested and down at the bottom water. So question is about the fish that are upriver. has anything been tested, plans? They're all
Yes,
crustaceans?
yes. There have been many tests for the sites. They did both upstream and downstream and almost to Galveston Bay, and as well as the State Health Department for the Fish Advisory. They've been sampling all up and down the river since, well, I don't know when they started, but they've done a number of rounds of sampling.
Could you tell me, just curious, like, let's say Lake Houston Dam area, there is a lot of boating up there, skiing, fishing, was the level acceptable?
The only thing I'm familiar with was what's below the dam. I didn't look at anything above the dam, so. Yeah, no, they're mostly, like, several miles upstream, the levels were lower. You know, the average around the waste pits, I'll say they range from about 2 to 5 parts per trillion. And to put that in perspective, the health department uses a level of about 2. So if it's above about 2, they'll issue a fish advisory, and that's why they did it. But
Gary, if I can answer that.
Oh, thank you.
There's actually a fish consumption advisory from Lake Houston Dam to Upper Galveston Bay and across the Houston Ship Channel. And if anybody's interested, I have a map with us that can show you where the fish consumption advisory is in place for. And they just
made
they
more public.
Do what?
Shouldn't they be on the air telling people? I mean, they have little signs posted, and people are fishing under the signs. And the RV
You're right,
parks
they
are saying, "Come and fish off our dock."
You're right.
We
And
want you people
new
here
water
because
park.
you don't live here. You're all transients, so we're not going to tell you that the fish in the river, they're boating, they're jet skiing, they're fishing, they're swimming. That RV park next to me, they're doing everything that you people have advised against. They don't tell any of their residents.
Right.
We go down and tell them when we see them out there fishing, "Oh, we didn't know that." There, it's all about the dollar. It's all about the money. But they're killing
more than
people.
coffee, and these people are out there fishing.
They're killing
And I understand
people.
that. And if I could have a chance to address
Go
that.
ahead.
The health department, we have spent hundreds of hours out here trying to tell people, do not swim in the river, do not eat the fish. Every time they change our fish consumption advisory, we come out here and we talk to people. We went to every RV park from I-10 up towards Lake Houston to tell the people, don't eat these fish. I mean, you can fish in the river, but we advise you not to eat the fish at this time. They are contaminated. When they just redid the fish advisory that extends it up to the Lake Houston Dam, we have put out some more information. This week we distributed over 2,400 pieces of material in the Channelview area trying to let people know this advisory has been extended north of I-10. They have found contamination in the fish from Lake Houston.
For not putting signs up or something. I mean, isn't there some way they can let people?
A lot we can do about that. What we can do is try to get to the people and not depend on the RV parks to let people know
The problem
and to
with
go
it is,
out.
the real problem with it is, that's a great fishery out there. It's probably one of the best fisheries in the Galveston Bay complex. I fished here all my life. My great-grandparents settled here over 100 years ago. They were the 4th family to move in this area. I know the fishing out here, and it's fantastic. And if you see it, you see these folks go out here fishing for these fish, and they disregard the signs. They don't, so there's not an issue. The issue is not whether you're going to stop people from fishing or crabbing out here. That is not going to happen. We have witnessed that. Okay. The only other option is to remove all of this stuff.
Correct.
Because you got to protect the public.
You're right.
You have to protect, that's the only way you can protect the public and get it cleaned up is to remove all this stuff.
Okay, and you're right.
Now, and as far as I'm sorry, Gary, I got a question. When you go and put we have all this stuff in this pit that's a lightweight material that oozes out. Now you go out there and you're going to put aggregate on top of it, heavier rocks on top of this. What happens to the stuff when the rocks start to sink? Archimedes' principle, okay?
That was one of the concerns, and that's why they're doing a survey on the cap. So if the cap were sinking, if that were happening, then the cap would sink. But they're surveying that thing every quarter, and it's not sinking. They're also...
It's not a matter of if the rock's going to sink and displace the material. It's a matter of when they're going to sink.
What? Okay, maybe a better way to answer it, that cap is a temporary cap. It's not the final remedy. That's these other things we're talking about. One of the alternatives was a cap, but one of the alternatives was a removal.
But
But
it's your choice to decide which one is going to happen. This is what you're telling me. You guys get to choose.
it's my supervisor that
Well,
gets to
but you
decide.
guys get to choose. We have no say. We live here.
There will be, when
We
we...
are dying here.
Would your
sorry about
supervisor
that.
want this in his backyard? That's my question.
I wouldn't want it in mine, I can say that, okay? But there will be an opportunity, we haven't decided, we're just kind of in the initial stages of this. When we come up with a remedy that we think looks pretty good, we're going to come back out here and say, well, we think this is the best option, and here's why. And you can say whatever you want to say.
But then what? Then you go, oh, thank you for your opinion.
You know what? We may keep the same remedy, or we may change it. And, you know, I can't say...
Say it, it's not a good remedy.
Okay, let's move back over here, please. Thank you in the back, Miss. Thank you for all the questions. But we're leaving a lot of other folks out over here. You in the back have had your hand up for a long time. Go ahead. Could you speak a little louder? Or come up to the microphone.
This berm on the south side of I-10, this other side over here, is there any plans to clean it up along with the other side, or are y'all just going to forget it for now and just concentrate on the north? Yeah. What's going to be done about that?
Actually, that's a very good question. That's one of the things I was going to cover that I kind of skipped over. But in the draft right now, there is really no plan for the southern impoundment. And one of the changes we're going to add to it is there needs to be alternatives for the south, just like there is for the north. So there's not anything in there right now, but there will be in the final report. So
It's just as bad as the north.
it's higher. It's 50,000. The north is 30. So. Excuse me?
Standing on 20,000 feet.
Responsible parties.
We're standing on 20,000 feet.
That's part of our site investigation. That's ongoing.
Okay, it will subside. I can calculate the subsidence rates.
Now, international
It will subside.
Yes. Waste management.
Okay, Gary, do you want to repeat the question this gentleman has?
Okay, I'm telling you, we're standing on 20,000 feet of subsided sediments. Okay, this cap rock and the polluted sediments, they will subside. There's nothing you can do to stop it. So there actually is no other solution.
Well, we don't disagree that subsidence isn't a concern. We agree with you. Why do you think this happens?
It's not a concern, it's a reality.
Well, it's a reality.
There's no other solution other than removing it.
That's it. That's it.
That is a reality. Subsidence is a reality. I agree with you 100%, and that should be considered with those alternatives. Absolutely.
There should be no other alternatives. There's one alternative. Out.
Okay, thank you.
I think it's who's responsible for it?
Okay, so EPA has right. So EPA, does everybody? Well, I see a lot of familiar faces. So for those of you that are new, the folks that EPA has identified today, but there could be more in the future, are two what we call responsible parties, which would be formerly Champion Paper, now it's International Paper, and then McGinnis Industrial Maintenance Corporation, or MIMC.
And who are they now? Who bought McGinnis?
I believe
Waste Management.
I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an attorney, but I believe they're a subsidiary of Waste Management. I believe that's.
I can tell you who they are. I can tell you exactly who they are.
Okay.
And then it's just quit dancing around the bush.
I think I answered the question, sir.
No, you didn't.
I'm sorry. Did I not? Did I not answer
the issue? I asked you who was responsible. You said International Paper.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of them.
Okay, and then I also said McGinnis Industrial Maintenance Corporation.
That's right.
Did everybody hear that?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, so how is that bullshit? I'm sorry.
Okay. Do you know when the International bought Southland Paper Company?
I'm sorry, who?
Southland Paper.
Okay, well we have
Champion.
Okay.
You know they have 548 locations, International Paper. They have 3 right here in Houston. Their main office is in Memphis, Tennessee. The phone number, I called them today. I wanted to buy their property out there on Highway 90. They don't own that anymore. The Southland Paper Mill was built in 1938. In 1967, they built the Southland Mill out here on Highway 90. But they didn't notify the TPWD until April the 14th, 2005. And then, December the 29th, 2011, the county sued them for $25,000 a day up to 1965, but we've heard nothing about it. We don't know what they're doing with it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's just saying we need to keep moving on.
I'm telling you some facts. And then in 2000, it was the International Paper Company bought Champion and Pasadena, Texas. So that meant that waste was there before then. They're responsible. And that gives, you said they don't exist? They do exist. They both exist.
Right.
You know what we need to do? I tell you, this is the simplest situation.
Okay.
We put it in barrels, dig it all up, put it in barrels. They got 548 locations. Get a court order, take it to their doorsteps, and dump it out.
Okay.
You got 3 right here in Houston you can start with.
Okay, good. Thank you. We heard that. Miss over here.
Yeah, my concern is, I don't know.
Hey, speak.
My concern is, my concern is that, okay, you have a pit on the north side of the interstate and a pit on the south side, right? The way it's showing in the picture. You have all these barges right here. Yeah. Okay? They used to just all be on the south side. Now, they have moved to the north side of the pit. They're docking on the islands and stuff. Isn't that moving around and their motors and stuff, their props, making all this churn up and stuff? You know, but why all of a sudden are the barges on the north side? They're just all parked there.
That's a new company.
But we allow them to park on the islands.
The answer to your question is yes, and that's a big concern. You know, we're talking about pros and cons. Well, one of the problems with the cap is if you leave the cap, yeah, those barges are going past it. What happens if one of them breaks free and runs up on the cap? And then the cap is gone.
They weren't there a few years ago. Now they're there.
Kirby and Van Marine, they rode the river right there at I-10. It used to be the best free boat ramp on the river. They blew it out of the years. Now what are they going to do with the pit?
Okay, that's right.
They're going over. You know, where did these barges come from?
We run over these waters all the time.
Okay, you've talked a long time. Are you finished with yours? Okay. We need to move over here. This lady's had her hand up for a while.
I was just curious, is there a precedent of another site like this that the EPA has cleaned up?
Love Canal?
There are several other Dodson sites. There's one up in Michigan right now. Well, I understand that site was up to 100,000. So parts per trillion sale was even higher. I think they're still trying to decide what to do. Last thing I heard is they were putting armor cap over it. It may be some removal. I mean, that's just what I know about it. Yes. You know, all these things we're talking about, that's just, you know, putting cap on or taking it off, dredging it up. I mean, that's common. It's done in a lot of sites. There's some benefits to each one. For instance, dredging. You know, when you go and dredge in the mud, you're going to stir up the mud. And that's one of the problems with dredging. But, you know, that may be, in some sites, that's selected as the remedy because, well, it needs to be taken out of there. And it's accepted, that drawback, because the other options just aren't as good for one reason or another. So.
Okay, you had a question right here.
It's very difficult to hear the question without the mind. Excuse me for speaking out of order.
At that moment, I was just going to ask if that particular site you were referencing. If that particular site you are referencing is on a river.
It is. Okay.
I had a couple other questions. after it's cleaned up or capped or whatever the solution is there a deterioration rate of the toxic chemicals?
One of the bad things about dioxin is it doesn't break down very quickly. So once it's there, it's going to be there for a very long time.
Another question I had was in reference to a question that the gentleman had about the commercial fishing in this area. Is there an entity that sets off areas that are off limits to commercial fishing?
I can't answer that right now, but I will tell you we have meetings with other local agencies, and that was one issue I was going to bring up at the next one. We don't have one scheduled yet, but I think we'll have one within the next month. I know that issue has been discussed because everybody is aware that there are people going out there, they're catching whatever, and then they're selling it, and you're right, nobody knows about the fish advisory.
There's a sign. There's a sign right there in the men's room. You can see it from where you're standing. It says, "Good fishing starts here." And we know that's not true. It says, "Good fishing starts here." Millions of people are eating this fish every year, and that's why removal is the only option. Because while everyone in this room knows how dangerous that fish is, the millions of people who eat it all over the country don't know that. A woman wrote an article on Wired.com today, a Pulitzer Prize winner named Deborah Blum. She wrote an article for Wired.com today that said every year in the spring, these trucks start coming up to Wisconsin that say, "Fresh fish from Galveston Bay," and they line up to buy it. And they have no idea because they don't live here in Highlands and none of their neighbors are getting cancer. That's why removal is the only option.
Yeah. Okay, let's go here to you.
Does this,
speak up so I can hear you.
Does this still fall under y'all's Cradle to Grave Act? The fact that Waste Management bought it from McGinnis created it, Waste Management purchased it, it's now their problem. So is that how y'all are going to attack this?
Yeah, that's more of an enforcement question. Let me. The cradle to grave usually refers to transportation of waste, and so. But I think what you're really asking is, with respect to the law, environmental law, how does EPA determine who's responsible, right? And so the answer to that question is there's a law called CERCLA, S-C-E-R-C-L-A, CERCLA. It's a very powerful law, and what CERCLA and the NCP, National Oil and Hazardous Pollution Contingency Plan, NCP for short, those two laws are the law that gives Gary and I the authority under Superfund to identify who's responsible. So for CERCLA example, I'll just give a hypothetical example. Not the waste pit. A waste somewhere else was dropped off by a company that took it there. They were contracted out. They don't have anything to do with the waste other than they transported it. Okay? Guess what? They're in the potential pool of people. Then the company that leased the land to the chemical company, guess what? They leased the land. Guess what? They're also in the pool of the potential responsible party. The chemical company is anybody that has any handling in any of the process of the waste, no matter how far back. I don't care if it was 1,000 years ago, even though EPA didn't exist 1,000 years ago, are still potentially responsible parties. So, with that being said, we looked at transporters, people that own the land, people that, did contract business with them, people, the companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So